Thanks for getting your thoughts on this. The question was, we have loads of money to bail out the banks, but yet we have nothing to spend on one single wind farm. Investors have been able. So, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to just first say, as the Wingate from the campaign against climate change, I was given very, very short notice of this meeting, I'm afraid, because the actual speaker couldn't get here. And I've had a wonderful time trying to find my way across your university. So yes, where are the world's resources locked up into? Because I think for a campaign against climate change is really saying that let's look at the world we do have, the actual world, which is a world dominated by corporate interests, a world which most of the resources of the world are very much locked up into this incredibly destructive cycle of war, poverty. We have 1 billion people that live in starvation in the planet, whilst the UK alone throws away something like 2.3 million tonnes of food every year. So we're locked into this horrendously destructive system. So the answer to the question is really, where are the resources going? The resources are being locked up into the wars, the resources are going towards the corporations, the banks. Colossal chunks of public money are being taken up for this. And we have a body politic, governed by 3 parties that are really effectively just pushing all this through. But basically stealing from the public purse money that could be spent on wind farms, and not just wind farms, a whole plethora of environmental technologies. I think we could have an environmental revolution, actually. I think we could have a green revolution if there was the political willpower there, but there is no serious political will. I don't know if anyone's mentioned what happened at Vestas with the wind farm, one of the few wind farms, turbine manufacturers that we do have in this country, closed down by the government. So the answer to the question is that the only people who are capable of changing the world is basically you, us, because we can ask a lot of our politicians, but what they're going to deliver we have to be very, very sceptical of. And I think Copenhagen is going to be a very unpleasant reminder of just actually how little they're going to deliver in substance rather than rhetoric, and how much also they're going to, just like the banks are pushing the costs of their crisis onto us, the governments of the world are going to try to push the costs of their environmental crisis on us as well.
Thanks very much, so you've managed to answer that 5 questions there. Ian, apparently we don't have any political will. Would you have anything to say on that in terms of moving towards a green?
Well, you probably know Caroline Lucas, Green Party leader, was at Vestas trying to support it. You probably know she launched the Green New Deal with other organisations like the New Economics Foundation. So yes, the 1 million jobs was our slogan, looking at alternative energies, and also the boring stuff like insulation and so on. Vestas, as you probably also know, is a Danish company. Denmark and Germany have now quite well established in terms of wind turbine production, so in fact we're a bit late on the scene to say let's get the jobs there. There are a lot of jobs that could be got in renewable energies, but we're really very, very late indeed, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was conscious with this question, Handy, I think, for quite a lot.
Yeah, I was wondering, you're saying about wind farms, things like that, and tidal barrages. I was wondering if, say, future nuclear power, if works in other countries failed here, once.
Yeah, please.
I'd just like to ask everyone a very simple question. You've got a great big wind farm, doesn't matter where it is, and the wind drops from 20 miles an hour to 10 miles an hour. Does anybody know how much the power drops?
Should be to an 8.
Well done. 1/8. Well done. There's an enormous dependence of wind velocity on power, and that, of course, is another reason why wind farms are not really very efficient and need to be subsidised heavily by all the governments.
Well, nuclear, of course, has colossal government subsidies. In fact, I think there was a government report a few years ago saying that nuclear was incredibly cost ineffective. It was a loss-making industry.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so Deirdre,
Yeah.
the future?
Well, I think a mixed is the future, and part of that mix is nuclear. I mean, we have nuclear at the moment, but the problem is that all of the plants but one, I think, will be closed down by 2023. And they should have done something a long time ago, the government, to start replacing them. They've left it terribly late. Of the ones that I think it was only last week, they announced some new ones, and all but 2 are in places where there already is one, so it's basically a replacement. I do think, though, that they need to be more responsible for the costs, and for the cost of their waste as well. So I don't agree that we should be subsidising it so much, and my party doesn't agree that. But I do think it's an important part of the mix. And what we have to think about, I think, is if we don't have that, I mean, do you want huge power cuts? And while you may not mind putting on a few extra layers of clothes, power cuts for elderly people can be lethal, frankly. And because, of course, it doesn't matter if you've got gas heating. If you haven't got the electric switch to start it off, to send the motor, it doesn't work. So most people would find they've got no heating in a power cut. And as I say, for elderly people, that can be actually really serious. So we have to do something to make sure that we have enough power for all the people in the country, and therefore I think we need a mix of different powers.
So Roger, do you think a switch to greener sources is going to consume power and turn Britain to darkness? Or?
No, I don't think so at all. I think nuclear power is a very interesting subject, because some people who are passionate about climate change do actually believe that we should go down the nuclear route. I don't agree with that. And the main reason is that we will take a huge amount of resources to develop a new nuclear industry. And what we should be doing is putting those resources into energy efficiency and renewables generation.
So France is wrong now.
Sorry?
France is wrong.
Yes, I think France is wrong, absolutely.
75% nuclear.
And the issue with nuclear power is not carbon free, because mining uranium is incredibly energy intensive. We've become dependent, as we are with oil, on some rather dodgy parts of the world for our energy supply, whereas renewables are generated on our own shores, so we have energy security. And yes, it needs a mix of different types of renewables, including gas from waste, tidal. Tidal winds can work quite well, it's relatively predictable, unlike wind, and wind in the mix. So if you have that mix, the lights don't go out.
Basically, we talked about, Roger here mentioned that how it's not, the deal which is in Copenhagen is not just about our country and plunging our country into green fund, but also the responsibility we have as the West and developed countries to go in and responsibility to other countries, because some people do live in the Southern Hemisphere, although maybe only one or two apparently. Nonetheless, on that, I think it's really important. So maybe Roger, you could start with this, as you mentioned it earlier. What are your views in terms of why is it not just important that in Copenhagen we gain a deal which is good for us and also our generation and our future, but also why we have responsibility to others in the global scale?
Well, it's about our self-interest, because currently we live in a world where we exploit the third world incredibly. If you go into a hospital in this country, and I had a minor operation a couple of years ago, most of the nurses who looked after me were from Africa. So in other words, what we're doing is we're taking some of the poorest countries in the world, the poorest healthcare systems, and we're taking their best healthcare provision so that they can look after us. And that's just one example now, because of, and you can look at China going into Africa to take all their resources, because China's realising that in a few years' time they're going to be running out of resources. With this sort of little inequality, that's what breeds, in the long term, the sorts of issues in terms of violence, in terms of terrorism, in terms of mass migrations of the desperate. If we actually pursue a long-term policy of justice between nations, between the first and the third world, those sorts of issues will be resolved without people having to move across the world, without people getting engaged so much in terrorism. So it's in our interests as much as it's the right thing to do.
Okay, Ralph, comments. Do we think we have a responsibility to others on this planet, or is it just leave the way as we are going?
I think we have a great responsibility to others on many topics which have all been mentioned tonight, but I don't think we have a responsibility on what most of Copenhagen is about. I think overpopulation, shortage of food and healthcare, clean water are essential things in that we should be helping the world, I believe, yes.